My name is Maya Carter. I'm 26 years old, a project architect living in Seattle. On my wedding day, every single seat on my side of the aisle was empty. My father had promised to walk me down the aisle, to place my hand into my future husband's with pride. But instead, he stood beneath a balloon arch at my sister Lena's gender reveal. I lifted the hem of my white dress, steadied my breath, and walked alone. The cameras caught the shimmer of my veil, but what burned deeper was the silence, the hollow echo of a family that chose pastel balloons over my vows. 1 hour later, I posted one photograph. That single act turned my entire family upside down. To understand why that moment was both devastating and liberating, you have to know the story that came before it. For most people, a wedding is the climax of support, the place where relatives fly across the country just to witness your joy. For me, it was the final proof of a truth I had spent my whole life denying. I would never be first choice in my family. From childhood, the pattern was there, subtle enough that outsiders could dismiss it, but sharp enough that I felt every cut. When my report cards came home with perfect grades, my father's response was a nod. When Lena brought home a B, it was ice cream sundaes and photographs. When I won first place in statewide debate, my mother said she was proud. After she finished uploading 30 blurry pictures of Lena sitting on the soccer bench. Still, I believed adulthood would change things. I studied architecture on a scholarship, worked endless nights on drafting tables and site visits, and by 24, I had been promoted to lead designer on a waterfront project. Colleagues cheered me, bosses respected me, yet at family dinners the conversation circled around Lena's temporary jobs, Lena's changing majors, Lena's heartbreaks. It was as if my accomplishments were invisible. I told myself it didn't matter, that success was enough, that someday they would notice. I told myself that until the day of my engagement dinner, when Lena announced she was pregnant and my mother nearly knocked over the waiter in her rush to hug her. My night became her night, and I swallowed the familiar lump of being pushed to the background. And yet I still clung to hope. I still believed that my wedding would be different. My father looked me in the eye and said, "I'll walk you down. Count on it." Those 6 words carried me through months of tense planning. I pictured the scene like something out of a movie. The proud father, the tearful bride, the long-awaited recognition. It never crossed my mind that he would choose otherwise. The morning of my wedding was clear, the kind of blue sky that seems painted for photographs. Guests filled the right side of the venue. Jackson's family, friends, colleagues, every chair taken, every face beaming. The left side, my side, gaped empty. Not a cousin, not an aunt, not even my father. My chest tightened as I stepped forward, the violin beginning its soft entrance. I thought about stopping, thought about running, but then I remembered something Aunt Ruth had whispered months before. "Sweetheart, you'll have to write your own seat in the front row." She was right, so I walked, alone. Every step was a declaration. I am here, even if they refuse to be. Later that night, as Jackson held me close, I scrolled through the photos our friend Taylor had captured. One image froze my breath. It showed me from behind, dress sweeping the aisle, rows of empty chairs glaring back like silent witnesses. I chose that single photo, wrote a caption that came from my rawest place, and pressed share. I turned off my phone, unaware that truth moves faster than silence. That image sparked 47 missed calls before I even landed in Hawaii. I truly want to know where in the world this story will reach. Leave a comment and let me know, and don't forget to subscribe, so I have the strength to create more stories worth sharing. Thank you for listening. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, 3 years older than my sister Lena. From the moment she came into the world, it was obvious where the attention went. If I came home with straight A's, my father would nod, say, "Good job," and turn back to the newspaper. If Lena came home with a B, my mom would clap like she had just been accepted into Harvard and then drive her out for ice cream. At school events, I would scan the crowd for their faces, but their cameras were always pointed at Lena, even when she spent most of the soccer game warming the bench. Outsiders called it sibling jealousy. I knew it was something more. It was the steady rhythm of being overlooked. By high school, the imbalance became undeniable. I graduated as valedictorian, gave a speech that made the entire auditorium stand, and my parents missed half of it because they were across town helping Lena shop for her sophomore prom dress. That night, our living room walls filled with glossy pictures of her in sequins. My graduation photos, the ones that should have mattered most, were tossed in a drawer. I laughed it off to my friends, but inside I learned what it felt like to celebrate in silence. Still, I kept going. Architecture school, scholarships, endless nights drafting designs under fluorescent lights. At 24, I became one of the youngest project leads at my firm. My coworkers threw a little party, raised glasses, even gave me a card signed by everyone in the office. When I told my parents, they smiled faintly, and then shifted to a long discussion about Lena's third change of college major. My achievements were wallpaper. Her updates were the headlines. So when wedding planning began, I thought maybe this time would be different. A wedding is supposed to be the day a daughter takes center stage. But the pattern returned almost immediately. My mom joined the bridal planning group chat, promised to help with colors and invitations, and then canceled twice in a row because Lena needed errands. After the second cancellation, I quietly removed her from the chat. I didn't rant. I didn't even explain. I just clicked remove and sat there staring at the screen. Maybe to some people it looked petty, even cruel. But to me, it felt like survival. One small step toward protecting myself from the constant disappointment of waiting for someone who never came through. Not long after, Aunt Ruth pulled me aside at a family barbecue. She'd always been gentle, the type to stay quiet and never take sides. But that evening, she pressed my hand and whispered, "Sweetheart, you'll have to write your own seat in the front row." Her words felt heavy, like she was preparing me for the truth I didn't want to face. She had seen it all along, and in her quiet warning, she confirmed what I was too afraid to admit. I would never be handed the place of honor. I would have to carve it out myself. Then, just weeks before the wedding, my phone buzzed late at night. A message from my dad lit up the screen. 6 words, "I'll walk you down." Count on it, I read it again and again until the letters blurred. For the first time in years, I felt hope break through. Maybe this time I wouldn't be invisible. Maybe this time he would stand beside me. But after that message, he went silent. Our engagement dinner was supposed to be the moment when 2 families came together, a small celebration before the whirlwind of planning began. Jackson and I had reserved a private room in a quiet restaurant in downtown Seattle. His parents showed up early with wrapped gifts and cards, smiling as if this night mattered just as much to them as it did to me. My parents arrived late, as usual, dragging Lena with them, even though she hadn't been invited to such an intimate gathering. I should have known something was coming. I just didn't know how badly it would sting. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Jackson's father gave a toast that made me tear up. He spoke about family being more than blood, about how they already saw me as a daughter, my chest filled with warmth. Then my own father cleared his throat, muttered something generic about marriage being hard work, and sat back down. It was so flat it could have applied to any couple in the world. I swallowed the disappointment and kept smiling. After all, I had learned long ago not to expect too much. Then Lena cleared her throat dramatically. She pressed a hand over her still flat stomach and announced, "Since everyone important is here, I want to share some exciting news. I'm pregnant." The room went still. My mother shrieked first, nearly knocking her glass over. My father stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. They wrapped Lena in hugs as if she had just cured cancer. The dinner that was meant to honor my engagement turned, in seconds, into a baby celebration. Waiters rushed in with champagne, except for Lena, of course, while my parents peppered her with questions about due dates and morning sickness. Jackson squeezed my hand under the table, his jaw tight. His parents exchanged looks of pity. I smiled weakly, but inside I was breaking. It was supposed to be my night. Instead, I was the extra guest at my own dinner. Looking back, I know some people judged me for a decision I had made earlier. I hadn't invited Aunt Ruth, the one relative who had quietly helped me through lean years when I could barely make rent. She had always been kind, but she also had a way of voicing uncomfortable truths, and I thought the dinner would be simpler without her. Viewers would probably argue I was wrong, that leaving out someone who supported me was disrespectful. Maybe they're right. But in that moment, I thought I was protecting myself. I didn't want any more complications on a night that was supposed to be about love. Ironically, complications showed up anyway, wrapped in a pregnancy announcement and delivered like a spotlight theft. A few days later, as if the hijacked dinner hadn't been enough, I discovered something that made my stomach twist. An email from Lena's event venue somehow made its way into my inbox by mistake. In the contract details, highlighted in bold, were the words, "Mother approved same date." My mom had knowingly signed off on Lena's event scheduled for the exact day of my wedding. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't pregnancy brain. It was a choice. My hands shook as I read it, realizing the betrayal wasn't just from my sister. It was from my mother, too. I confronted Lena with what I thought was a generous offer. "I'll cover the cancellation fee," I said. $1,750. You won't lose a dime. Just move the shower." She didn't even blink. "Not a chance," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through me. That was the moment I understood. She didn't forget my date. She wanted to erase it. And that was only the beginning. After the engagement dinner disaster and the email leak, I tried everything I could to make peace. I sent Lena 3 different sets of dates she could move her shower to. I even called venues on her behalf, checking their availability, desperate to find a solution that worked for everyone. Each time, she brushed me off with excuses. Too close to finals. Too far along in the pregnancy. Not convenient for Mom. It didn't matter what I offered. The answer was always no. She had already decided that my wedding would be collateral damage in her quest for attention. Still, I thought maybe my father would be different. He had texted me those 6 words, "I'll walk you down." Count on it, I clung to them like a lifeline. One night, I called him directly and begged, "Dad, even if you can't stay for the reception, just come for the ceremony. 15 minutes. Walk me down the aisle, then you can leave for the shower. That's all I'm asking." There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a sigh that seemed to drain the air out of my lungs. "Your mother and sister need me there," he said quietly. "You'll be fine." "You've always been the independent one." His words slammed into me harder than any argument. I wasn't his daughter that day. I was an afterthought. What I didn't tell him was that I had pressed record before the call started. Washington is a one-party consent state, so legally I was allowed to do it. But ethically, it's murkier. Some would say I crossed a line. I told myself I just needed the truth preserved. After years of being told I exaggerated, being called jealous or dramatic, I needed proof, something to hold on to when the gaslighting began. Still, a part of me knew that pressing that red button made me no better than the people I accused of betraying me. It's one of those choices that invites debate, survival instinct or betrayal. Days later, my cousin accidentally leaked screenshots from a family group chat I wasn't in. The words glared back at me from the screen. "She's just drama baiting for likes." My mother had typed it. My father had liked the message with a thumbs-up emoji. My sister had responded with a string of laughing faces. Reading those lines felt like being shoved underwater. Not only were they skipping my wedding, they were mocking me for caring. My pain was their punchline. I stayed up that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory of childhood, every time I had been told I was overreacting. And here it was, written out in digital ink, confirmation that the problem wasn't in my head. It was in my family. The week of the wedding crawled forward, each day heavy with silence. No calls, no text, no questions about final details or last-minute errands. My friends stepped up, filling in where my family should have been, but the ache lingered. Even Jackson, steady as ever, couldn't fully ease it. He would hold me close and whisper, "We'll make this beautiful." But I couldn't shake the emptiness. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and still. My bridesmaids bustled around the hotel suite, curling hair and fixing makeup, while I sat staring at my phone on the nightstand. The screen was dark, lifeless, as if mocking me. No last-minute message, no "we're on our way," no text from my dad reminding me he'd be waiting at the aisle. Just silence. Heavy, final silence. And in that silence, I understood. I was walking into the biggest day of my life completely alone. The morning slipped into afternoon with a sharp clarity, every sound magnified as if I were walking through a crime scene where silence carried meaning. The garden venue gleamed under the June sun, rows of white chairs divided by a trail of rose petals. On the right, Jackson's family filled every seat, their laughter and camera flashes creating a steady hum. On the left, the chairs reserved for my family stood empty, stark as unclaimed evidence. Even the breeze seemed to hush, as if taking note of the absence. Minutes before the ceremony began, I pulled the MC aside. "Take out the father walking bride announcement," I whispered. His eyes widened. "But that's part of the program." "People expect it. Not anymore," I said firmly. The staff scrambled, shuffling papers and whispering to one another. Some guests noticed the commotion. It might have looked rash, even petty, erasing the tradition at the last second. But I couldn't let the silence of my family be immortalized in the script. If my father chose absence, then the program would reflect reality. To this day, some people argue I overreacted, that the symbolism should have remained untouched. But standing there, it felt like survival. I refused to let an empty gesture haunt my ceremony. The music swelled, violins trembling like nerves stretched thin. My bridesmaids floated down the aisle one by one, soft pastels gliding across the petals. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, the weight of my gown pressing into my shoulders, each footfall echoing like a gavel strike. Halfway down, I faltered. The pitying glances from the guests pressed against my back, whispers curling through the air like smoke. And then, from the front row, Jackson's father, Evan, stood. He didn't step toward me. He didn't try to take my arm. Instead, he pressed his hand firmly over his heart and nodded, a gesture so simple yet so powerful it steadied me more than words ever could. My breath caught, but my feet kept moving. I walked alone, but not unsupported. When I reached Jackson, his eyes brimmed with tears. His hands closed around mine, thumbs brushing against the tremor I couldn't hide. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered, low enough for only me to hear. "Never again." Those 3 words cut through the emptiness, replacing it with something fierce and solid. We recited our vows, voices breaking on promises that spoke of chosen family, of loyalty, of never making each other invisible. The crowd wept, some openly, as if they could feel the gravity of what was being rewritten in that moment. But beneath the beauty, shadows lingered. Later, when Taylor showed me the photographs, one frame caught my breath like cold air. A cousin had tried to slip into the empty row on my side. She was halfway seated when her phone lit up. Seconds later, she stood and walked briskly out of frame. In the image, you could see the glow of the text on her screen. Taylor zoomed in until the words were visible. It was from my mother. "Don't sit there." Leave it empty proof, captured in pixels, that the void wasn't accident. It was orchestrated. The ceremony ended in applause, but the sound felt muted in my ears. During the reception, I forced smiles, danced with Jackson, and thanked his parents for filling gaps they never should have had to. Yet every moment, the photographs waited in my phone like sealed evidence files. When the night was finally quiet, I chose one image, me, walking down the aisle alone, the rows of empty chairs staring back like silent witnesses. I uploaded it to Instagram with a caption from my rawest place. Then I turned my phone off, shutting the world out. And that silence was only the beginning. The night after the ceremony, I lay in the hotel bed staring at that single photo. Me walking down the aisle with the rows of empty chairs, staring back like a jury that had already reached its verdict. My thumb hovered over the screen, debating. Posting, it wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to hide what had been done to me. Finally, I pressed share, wrote a caption straight from the wound, and switched off my phone. By morning, the silence had cracked wide open. When I powered the phone back on, it vibrated so violently it almost slipped from my hands. 52 missed calls in the span of 1 hour. Notifications stacked like evidence folders. Texts from my parents, from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, even from people I barely remembered from high school. My inbox filled with messages that read like a timeline of shock. First disbelief, then outrage, then shame directed squarely at my family. The first person to break ranks was Aunt Ruth. She posted publicly, "As Chandra's aunt, I'm ashamed. No baby shower should ever come before your daughter's wedding. I should have been there. I'm sorry." Her words detonated across the extended family like a siren. Suddenly, relatives who had once stayed neutral were taking sides. Old friends of my parents commented, their disapproval written in plain text for the world to see. The story was spreading, not through tabloids or strangers, but through the quiet, relentless web of people who'd been watching for years. In the chaos, I made one choice that sparked even more controversy. I locked Lena's Instagram account so strangers couldn't flood her posts with comments. I thought I was protecting her, keeping her from drowning in the same tidal wave of judgment she had unleashed on me. But within hours, people twisted the narrative. "She stirred the drama and then hid," one message accused. "She wanted sympathy but not accountability," another said. I couldn't win. Every action I took became another piece of evidence dissected by people who had never walked in my shoes. Then came the most unexpected message of all. It wasn't from family or friends. It was from a lawyer, a friend of Aunt Ruth, who had followed the unfolding disaster online. "Do not delete the post," the message read. "It's evidence. Keep every screenshot, every message, every reaction. Someday you might need it." The words chilled me. I hadn't thought of my pain as evidence before, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. Each text from my father calling me selfish, each voicemail from my mother begging me to take it down, every laughing emoji from Lena, they all formed a record. Proof that what I had lived through wasn't paranoia, it was pattern. Jackson and I escaped to Hawaii for our honeymoon, hoping the ocean could wash away the noise. For a few days, it almost worked. We swam in clear water, let the sun bake our skin, and pretended the world outside didn't exist. But every time I turned my phone on, the storm surged again. More missed calls, more accusations, more confessions from relatives who suddenly remembered all the times I had been sidelined. The truth was no longer mine alone. It belonged to everyone who saw themselves in my story. 2 weeks later, we landed back in Seattle. I was sunburned, exhausted, and almost ready to face whatever waited. As we rolled our suitcases down the hall to our apartment, a knot twisted in my stomach. Something felt off, a tension humming in the air like the pause before a door slams shut. Jackson reached the door first, slid the key in, and froze. He leaned toward the peephole, then turned to me with an expression I had never seen before. "They're here," he said quietly. "Your parents. And Lena." And just like that, the battle I thought I had postponed was waiting on my doorstep. When I opened the door, the hallway smelled faintly of Lena's perfume, sweet and suffocating. My parents stood stiffly behind her, their faces a mix of exhaustion and anger. No flowers, no gifts, no congratulations, just demands. I stepped aside, letting them in, though my pulse hammered like a clock counting down. Jackson retreated to the bedroom at my request. This was my confrontation to Carrie. We sat in silence for a moment before my father finally spoke. "You need to take down that post," he said sharply, as if issuing a verdict. "People are calling us, asking questions. Your mother can't even go to her book club without being interrogated." His tone carried no trace of shame, only inconvenience. My mother added quickly, "That photo makes us look like monsters, Chandra." "It's hurting the family." I leaned back in my chair, my hands steady for once. "It makes you look exactly as you acted." I walked down the aisle alone because every seat on my side was empty. That's not slander, that's truth. Their eyes flickered, unsettled by my calm. I pressed on. "Dad, you promised me. Over and over again, you said you'd walk me down that aisle. And then you chose balloons and cupcakes at a shower over your daughter's vows. Do you even hear how that sounds?" For the first time, Lena spoke, her voice cracking. "I wanted them there. I wanted one moment where I wasn't second to you. So yes, I scheduled my shower on your wedding day, on purpose. I needed to win for once." My breath caught. It wasn't pregnancy brain. It wasn't coincidence. It was sabotage. I stared at her, words failing until the truth landed like a blow. My own sister had deliberately stolen the spotlight, and my parents had helped her do it. Then my mother's voice broke in, trembling but defensive. You've always been the capable one. The scholarships, the promotions, the awards. We used to brag about you at every holiday party. People thought we were such proud parents. I blinked, stunned. Bragged about me? You mean used me. You paraded my achievements when it polished your reputation, but when I needed support, you gave me scraps. My father's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The room felt like a courtroom, and I was finally presenting the evidence. Years of minimized graduations, forgotten birthdays, and now an empty aisle on my wedding day. Every broken promise lined up in front of them. They shifted uncomfortably under the weight of my testimony. We're here now, my father said, his voice strained. We want to make this right. Let us apologize privately, just us. I shook my head slowly. No, private apologies keep patterns hidden. I don't want whispered regret in my living room. I want accountability. The same way I had to bleed in public for anyone to finally see the truth. If you care about fixing this, you'll be honest out there, not just in here. The silence after my words was so heavy I could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen. Lena wiped at her eyes but said nothing. My mother stared at the floor. Finally, my father muttered, "We'll think about it." Then he stood, signaling the end of the encounter. My mother followed, Lena trailing behind, her hand resting protectively on her belly, as if her unborn child could shield her from guilt. The door shut behind them with a thud that echoed through the apartment. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground and they had no choice but to listen. But as their footsteps faded down the hall, I knew the confrontation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 6 months later, I sat across from Dr. Karen, my therapist, trying to put words around everything that had shifted since that night at my apartment. They came to dinner last week, I told her, and for the first time, my father actually asked me about work. Not just a polite question, he remembered details. He wanted to know more. The words sounded foreign even as I said them. After years of invisibility, his interest felt like wearing shoes I never believed would fit. Strange but real. It hadn't been an easy path. After the confrontation, my parents resisted my demand for public accountability. They begged for privacy, offered a belated wedding gift, even suggested we move on. But for once, I didn't shrink. I reminded them of every empty chair in that garden and every promise broken. Weeks passed before my father finally posted a short statement online. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. We made a terrible mistake choosing another event over our daughter's wedding. We are working to be better parents. It was the first time in my life he admitted fault publicly, and that mattered more than flowers or apologies whispered behind closed doors. Meanwhile, I built something sturdier than their fragile remorse. Jackson and I started new traditions. Sunday brunches with friends who showed up without conditions, dinner parties where every guest was celebrated, weekly calls with his parents who treated me like a daughter from the start. For the first time, I felt what it was like to be in a circle of love that didn't need performance to exist. It reminded me that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by consistency, by presence. Lena gave birth to a daughter that spring. I sent a simple card and a handcrafted mobile for the nursery. No grudges folded into the gift, just acknowledgement of new life. When we visited briefly, she tried too hard, showing me dozens of baby pictures as if that would patch the wound. I smiled politely but kept my distance. Healing with her would take years if it happened at all, and that was okay. Forgiveness is not the same as pretending. My father surprised me more than anyone. A month after his post, he asked to meet for coffee. His hands shook as he admitted something I'd long suspected, but never heard aloud. I favored your sister because she reminded me of my mother. I didn't realize how much I was repeating old patterns until it was too late. It wasn't a justification, but it was honest. And honesty, even late, was a seed worth planting. My mother's change came slower. She still stumbled into old habits, centering Lena in every conversation. But she started therapy too, nudged by my father's example. That effort, even imperfect, spoke louder than excuses ever could. As I spoke to Dr. Karen, I realized the real transformation wasn't in them, it was in me. I had stopped begging for scraps. I had stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. I had stopped confusing being silent with being strong. The photo of me walking alone down the aisle no longer haunted me as abandonment. It became a reminder of resilience. Every step I took was evidence that I could stand even when no one stood beside me. The life lesson? Love isn't proven by titles or traditions. It's proven by showing up. And if the people who should show up don't, you still deserve to walk forward with your head high, because the chairs that sit empty today can always be filled tomorrow by those who choose you consistently and without condition. So when you look back at your own story, ask yourself, who shows up without being asked, and who disappears when it matters most? The answer might break your heart, but it will also set you free.